to our fourth and final installment of the 2011 Power Players series, brought to you by our title sponsor, Skylight Financial, a member of the Mass Mutual Financial Group. We hope you've enjoyed the 2011 Power Players series so far. To date, we've brought you Ari Marin of MRN Limited, who discussed downtown development in places such as East 4th Street and University Circle. Next, we sat down with Tom Zenti from University Hospital Health System. As you may recall, for those of you who are here, Tom discussed the enormous impact that healthcare has on our region. At our last event, we spoke with Dave Gilbert, President and CEO of Positively Cleveland and the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission. David discussed how sporting events create hundreds of millions of dollars of impact on Northeast Ohio. And today, we conclude the series with a great speaker that I've enjoyed getting to chat with over lunch here, Terry Stewart, CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum, along with our eagerly anticipated Power Players that we're going to be recognizing later in the program this afternoon. Today we're going to be recognizing 15 of the region's top Power Players, each of whom is having a great impact on the regional economy in his or her own way. You'll meet them after a roundtable discussion that we have with Terry. To bring you this series, I just want to take a few minutes to thank the sponsors that have made it all possible. First and foremost, we've got our title sponsor, Skylight Financial, a member of the Mass Mutual Financial Group. Skylight Financial provides integrated financial planning services that help its clients reach their financial objectives. In these challenging times, this type of planning has never been more important. So I just want to thank Dan Brennan and your team for your support. Thank you, Dan. Next is Great Lakes Integrated, the new face of graphic communication. Whether it's pearls, QR codes, converting web to print, or a host of other marketing communication solutions, Jim Schultz, Dean Hanisco, and the team at Great Lakes Integrated have transformed their organization to be on the cutting edge with a host of technology-based and traditional solutions. I'd like to thank you for your support as well. Where would we be without our friends from Skoda Minotti, CPA Business and Financial Advisors? Greg Skoda, Jonathan Ebenstein, and team have been longtime partners with Smart Business. We truly appreciate the relationship. Skoda Minotti is a premier accounting, consulting, and advisory firm that delivers on its promise to provide a broad-based set of services to clients ranging from closely held businesses to public companies. Thank you, Jonathan and Greg and team. Nemacolin and Woodlands Resort. Nemacolin, a family and luxury vacation destination on 2,000 wooded acres in Laurel Highlands of southwestern Pennsylvania. For those of you who haven't been there, it's a must. It's spectacular. From the luxurious Forbes 5-star AAA Diamond rating, Falling Rock Boutique Hotel to the comfort of your RV, they have 6 lodging options to cater to everyone's personal choice. So we thank you, Dennis Noonan, and your group for your continued support as well. Our host, Sammy's. Sammy's, of course, is all about the food, which you're enjoying right now. Denise Fugo, who I haven't seen, but her team of professionals are very passionate about what their guests eat every day. Whether you're planning your wedding, cocktail and hors d'oeuvre reception, or an all-day meeting, Sammy believes the food should be flavorful, colorful, to the eye. So thank you, Denise. And last but not least, we want to thank our friends at Positively Cleveland, an award-winning destination marketing organization that promotes Cleveland and the greater Cleveland region to convention and meeting planners, leisure travelers as well. So again, thank you to all these sponsors. We really do want to recognize them because without them we wouldn't have this event right now. But now I'd like to bring up to introduce our speaker and moderator, Dan Brennan, Chief Marketing Officer and our title sponsor from Skylight Financial.
Thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure to introduce Terry Stewart, who's been President and CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum since 1999. Terry was born in Mobile, Alabama. He earned 2 undergraduate degrees, a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in Education from Rutgers University of New Jersey in 1969. Then in 72 and 74, he went on to earn his MBA in Finance and a JD in Law at Cornell University. Terry spent the next 15 years building a traditional business background. He served as an officer of Connecticut Bank and Trust Company. He also served as Vice President of Business Development and later General Manager of Strategic Planning and Business Development for the Continental Group. He also served as Vice President of Business Development for Combustion Engineering Incorporated. Terry then switched gears and began pursuing a career in a less traditional industry. In 1989, he joined Marvel Entertainment, a leader in the fields of publishing, merchandising, advertising, trading cards, toys, softwares, children's television. Marvel is best known for its comic book characters, including Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Incredible Hulk, Blade, Silver Surfer, and an additional 3,000 superheroes who make movies in Cleveland. Amen. Long active in civic and philanthropic endeavors, Terry is currently on the board of the Rhythm and Blues Foundation in Philadelphia, and he serves as an advisor for the annual Summer Stage Concert Series in Central Park in association with the City Parks Foundation in New York City. Terry also serves on the nominating committee for the Alabama Music Hall of Fame and the advisory committee for the prospective new National Museum of Hip Hop. He is a member of the Abu Dhabi Investment House Entertainment Advisory Board in Abu Dhabi. And locally, he serves on the boards for the Cleveland Film Festival, Positively Cleveland, the Cleveland Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Diversity Center of Northeast Ohio. Previously, Terry served on the boards of the U.S. Committee for UNICEF in New York and the National Committee to Prevent Child Abuse based in Chicago. We're honored to have Terry speak today, and please welcome him to this afternoon's program.
You know, Terry, in broad terms, everybody here has been to the Rock Hall, hopefully. I'm going to make the assumption that everybody in this room has gone to the Rock Hall once.
Let's see. Who hasn't been to the Rock Hall? You cowards. I know you're out there.
So, now that we figured it, everybody here has been here and not willing to tell us they haven't. You know, what's amazing about the Rock Hall is it's such a jewel for this town. And I want to start the conversation with, in your perspective, how do you see in broad terms what it's doing for this region and what has it done for this region since its opening?
Well, it's certainly a marquee for the city. And we've done Q studies in different places around the world, and it's one of the few entities that when you're in the Middle East or whether you're in Africa or Italy, if you say Cleveland, people will say the Rock Hall of Fame. So we like to think we're a marquee, we're a billboard, we're a beacon for this city, a city that I've lived in now for 13 years that I love, and one that unfortunately has too many bad jokes that people still tell about it. It also, I think part of what's lesser known, it's an economic engine for the city. We've been in business for 16 years, and over that time, the estimated economic impact is $2 billion. It's over $100 million a year. 95% of the people that come to the museum come from outside the region, and they typically stay 2 nights. They go to other businesses, restaurants, and rent cars, so we're very proud of that. And then the years that we have the inductions, which was every 3 years, you have an additional $15 to $20 million worth of economic impact there. So it's an economic engine, it's a marquee. It is also, surprisingly enough, an institution of education. This is probably the least known aspect of our enterprise. Our mission is to collect, preserve, and exhibit and educate. And if you're not aware, we have one of the most celebrated award-winning educational programs coming out of a fine arts museum in the United States. We have won awards for our toddler programs where we use musical therapists that reach inner city kids over a period of 12 weeks, teaching them literacy using music. And then we teach courses such as math, science, social studies, language arts, and finance to classes 1st through 12th grade. We teach at all 3 universities in the city, Case, Cleveland State, Tri-C. Our library's over at Tri-C that opened to the public in January. And so it's one of those. And we're also the #1 distance learning website in the United States, as voted by the teachers 4 years in a row, teaching math, science, social studies, language. So what are we? We're a little bit of everything, but we're really proud of being both a great museum, an attraction for tourists that come to Cleveland, spend their money, and also an educational institution.
You know, from the perspective of choosing which areas to go into, I mean, it's a lot of different things you guys are doing that plays on a lot of your strengths. How do you, as the director, as the CEO of the museum, really take a look and say, this is an area we're going to highlight, this is an area that's a revenue driver, this is an area that's pure education? How do you balance all those?
Well, if any of you run a not-for-profit, and I ran a for-profit, publicly traded company, so I had to make that transition from an EPS sort of life to a mission life. And we just had a conference yesterday, an afternoon conference over at Severance Hall, doing mission speak. And what's really important and very important for me is to learn to stay tied to our mission. It was very easy when I got here to get seduced by every musical thing in the world, every musician who wanted to play at the hall, everybody who wanted to sign to a label, every festival that wanted to be created. It all seemed like it was a natural outgrowth. It is not. Again, collect, preserve, exhibit, educate. Also, when you talk mission speak, on the revenue side, there are examples of things you shouldn't do. Sometimes the money is very attractive, but the example I use is that my first year I let somebody park a truck out front and give away doggy bacon strips. It sounds funny, but it really was a bad idea, and it upset a lot of our staff and some of our board, and I came quickly to realize we needed a process by which we evaluate these opportunities. So we pretty much go through a prioritization and a look at the mission to see, are there revenue opportunities, earned income opportunities? We're lucky because we have about 500,000 people here, so unlike a lot of not-for-profits, most of our revenue, 75%, is earned, 25% is contributed. And our challenge is to go and make it 50-50 on the contributed side. So we do take on, right now for the first time, we have finally found a licensing agency. It took me 13 years to find one that would rep us because we own no rights to any of the stars. All we own is the name of the institution and the building. And that's not a lot of heavy content for you folks that do any licensing. So we finally found an agency in New York that reps not-for-profits such as the Girl Scouts who have a similar situation. And one of our board members is one of the owners of K-Swiss. We have, by the way, we have a number of board members here today. Thank you all. I see Dan sitting here in front of me. Appreciate Dan Walsh. But we have board members in 20 cities around the country in order to sort of actualize the national, international aspect of what we do. And one of them is one of the owners of K-Swiss, and they've now introduced our merchandise in Taiwan and Korea in stores that they own. So that's, again, extending the brand and extending the mark and maybe revenue on the third level. It really is mission driven. What we see most of the time is a way to establish the brand and extend the mark first, and then perhaps the revenue will follow. Most of the revenue is going to come out of Cleveland, out of the building, out of the store, and out of our philanthropic opportunities.
Interesting. You know, you mentioned about concerts. We know there's a lot of different special exhibits. I want to explore a little bit the concerts that go on there. How do you determine who's going to come and play, and how that's set up?
Well, it's somewhat frustrating for a lot of folks. They want us to have a lot of shows and a lot of concerts. We really don't. Everything we do, for the most part, is connected to our educational programs in support of what we do. We do have an annual gala that occurs most years in May. We won't next year because of the inductions. And we have a summer concert series where we do try to get some emerging bands. Other than that, almost everything we do is based on bringing artists in to interview them for our archive series, because we film and tape everything. We stream it now around the world, and we film and tape it for the library, so you'll be able to see all those interviews and performances. So we really, and also really want to compete. This city is still a great music city, and it's still over-venued for the size of population that it has. And the club system here was extraordinary in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. I didn't grow up here, but I'm aware of it. And this club system is still quite something for the population that we have. And so the last thing we want to do is actually go out and compete by bringing lots of bands in and sort of take money off the table from those folks.
Do you partner with some of the organizations? I remember a couple years ago somebody came in and played the House of Blues, and I had heard that they were going to be over at the Rock Hall doing a special series the night before.
Yeah, we try to partner with most of the clubs, House of Blues, Beachland, Grog Shop, and often it allows us to get an artist here that we couldn't afford to pay to come, that we would bring in an extra day, sort of pay the incremental cost of the hotels and the transportation, so that we can do a Hall of Fame interview series and capture them for an hour to 2 hours talking about their careers.
Interesting. You know, the special exhibits, there have been so many great special exhibits over the years, the Pink Floyd The Wall, Janis Joplin, the John Lennon. How do you determine what special exhibit you're going to do, and what's the ramp-up time to make something like that happen?
Probably one of our biggest nightmares, because we typically, right now we have Women Who Rock, and hopefully if you haven't seen it, please go see it. If for no other reason to see Gaga's meat dress. Go quickly, it's deteriorating. That's a joke. It's not. It's stabilized. It's okay. There are no critters involved here. But that exhibit, in some ways, is easier because we didn't have to have the permission of any one artist. Most often our major exhibits center around one individual, and we get their permission whether they're alive or dead, and it's not easy dealing with these folks because of their schedules and how they live their lives. So consequently, very often we'll start an exhibit. A couple of years ago we started one with Neil Young, and we went out to California. He's kept everything in his life, which is fabulous, and his warehouse is full. And then Neil decided he really wanted to spend his effort on getting out all the live concerts he'd had recorded over time. And he completely went dark on us, just disappeared. Couldn't find him, wouldn't talk to us. And then one of his warehouses burned down. I don't know if you saw that, it was in the news about a year ago. So we had to walk away from that, and within about 6 months we had to put something else together. So the ramp-up time can be 2 to 5 years. Some things go away, some things restart. We do have a Grateful Dead exhibit opening the week of the inductions. Inductions are April 14th, but we'll be doing 9 days of activities. If any of you were here the last time, you'll want to be there again. But the Grateful Dead opens on Wednesday, April 9th or 10th, and hopefully all the living dead will be here, as we say. And hopefully one of the living dead bands will play. And we have gotten great cooperation from them, but that took a number of years because particularly with bands, if you have 3 or 4 members, there's always one person who hates museums, hates the ideas of exhibits, doesn't want their stuff on display, can come up with any number of reasons they don't want to hear about it.
No special seance for Jerry or for Ron McKernan?
No. Let's just say no.
So how do you choose, though? I mean, how do you decide it's going to be a Neil Young, or how do you decide it's going to be that? Somebody on the board comes, or does somebody come to you and say, we want to do a life retrospective?
Well, occasionally an artist will come and say they think it's a good time. They have a window open that they like to work with us, and then we try to be opportunistic. Secondarily, we have about 10 folks in our curatorial program that look at opportunities. They try to decide, is there a critical mass of material out there, either with the artist or with collectors that we can get our hands on. Mm-hmm. We often, people say, so why don't you have so-and-so's stuff on display? Well, sometimes artists won't give us their stuff. Sometimes their stuff has disappeared and collectors don't have it, or they won't lend it to us. So it's problematic about how we get the material. Can we get critical mass, and is the artist significant enough and had a big enough impact on the history of his music? So we have to play at that level to begin with.
Interesting. You know, most of the folks out here are in the for-profit sector. There are some non-profit folks out here, and you know they have to balance their time with regard to their constituencies, whether it's their clients, their employees, their vendors, their shareholders and stakeholders. How do you break your time with the folks that you would consider your various stakeholders in the company, with the organization?
Well, it is an institution with 150 employees, and there's about 140 down on the water, and there's another 10 over the museum. So much of my time is spent interfacing with those folks. Many of you out here have boards of directors. I am doubly blessed. I have 2 boards I report to, one in New York and one in Cleveland. And for many years there was some interesting issues that went on between the two that doesn't exist anymore. Our missions are very closely aligned now in terms of promotion and funding of the museum. So much of my time is spent with the 2 boards through an executive committee and through a finance committee. The museum is run in day-to-day basis by the Cleveland board, the New York board, which licensed it to Cleveland. Remember, folks, it was not ours. We didn't create it. They created it in New York, and we licensed it. We raised the money for it, but in that license, New York has oversight over exhibits, sponsorships, merchandising, and licensing. So anything I do in that area, I run through the New York board to get approvals. And the rest of the time I'm dealing largely with our chairman, Bill Rowley, at this time, and our executive committee. And then again, customers, constituencies, whether it's trying to reach a broader audience, whether it's generating new opportunities. We just recently signed a new deal with satellite radio with Sirius, where we're going back to 7 days and we'll have our own dedicated channel, which is something I had to spend a lot of time on. We'll be creating content for that channel 24/7, and the newer editions of the radios and the players that you get will have that station on it all the time. So that's going to cause a lot of angst among our folks having to create that content. So it's those kind of opportunities. You prioritize the opportunities, and you still have to, on a day-to-day basis, do your blocking and tackling with your staff and with your board. How
about with the artists themselves, whose memorabilia and items that you have on display?
I deal with a lot of artists, but only when I have a specific need. One of the challenges for folks that are in this world is that there's a big temptation just to go up and start yakking your mouth off with an artist. There's very little you can say to an artist that they haven't heard, and they often don't want to be bothered. So you have to play your cards correctly. But we have an awful lot of folks in the building that do spend their time talking to the artists, talking to their management, because we do need their stuff, we need their cooperation. And artists aren't philanthropic in a financial sense. We ask them for their stuff, we ask them for their time, and money would be third. And they get asked to do all of this daily, hundreds of times. So it's not surprising that they have a hard time with it. I mean, right now, for those of you who should, this is just a crass sort of ad for our American Music Masters that comes up in 3 weeks when the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, will be here for 2 days. We'll be honoring her with American Music Masters Award, but we've got, Cissy Houston, Lauryn Hill, Chaka Khan, Jerry Butler, Ron Isley, and a bunch of other artists coming in for free. We take care of their expenses, but that's the kind of dry powder I use up all the time. So that's where most of my calls go, and my time as my staff's calls go.
Interesting. The funding structure, the revenue model for the Rock Hall. Talk a little bit about how that works. Well,
we were built without an endowment or an operating reserve, which is not a really good idea for a not-for-profit. Not a good idea for any business. Who am I kidding? It's no working capital. This is not a good idea. We have managed to move through that over the years. As I mentioned earlier, 75% of our revenue comes from as earned income. That's the door and the store. And it was as little as 5% philanthropic. It's up to 25% now. And philanthropic in this case means memberships, foundations, planned giving, grants, annual fund from our board and from our other members. So that's the business model. The biggest challenge for all the not-for-profits today, unless you're sitting on an extraordinary endowment and operating reserve, is really securing your financial future. So we now have a small endowment of $5 million that we generated through a tremendous HBO show. If anybody saw it on HBO, it was the 25th anniversary show honoring the 25th anniversary of the inductions. It was at the Garden 2 years ago, and it was 2 nights of incredible music, and that generated $5 million for us, both off the show and off the DVD, which we're still selling. In fact, this week, the foundation did that in New York. They also, Time Life released 3 volumes of live music from the inductions and from the 25th anniversary. You can download on iTunes. So our hope is to, over time, generate enough income, revenue, net cash flow to create an operating reserve large enough. The library and archive itself eats $1 million a year, and there are no revenues attached to that. So before we built that, we put in place an operating reserve of $10 million for 10 years. And the key to something like that is not to spend it down. So we now have to go out and try to raise another $5 to $20 million to make it large enough so that the normal these endowments, you spend off 5% a year. I don't know how you make 5% a year anymore, but you spend off 5%, and that would be the $1 million we would need to run the library, so you don't penetrate to sort of the principle, the corpus of that. So it's a lot of moving parts, and at the same time, 500,000 people still have to come to the museum every year and spend money in the store. The good news about that, with what's going on in Cleveland, we're so excited because of the casino, the medical mart, the convention center, what's happening on the flats, what's happening down near us with the Browns. All that suggests that travel to Cleveland will increase just, integrally with what we're seeing now. And typically we get a big percentage of those people. That rising tide will lift all of our boats, I think. Hopefully on a destination basis, it lifts our boat a little bit higher.
Is there any kind of statistic, if somebody's coming into Cleveland for something and they're staying 2-3 days, where the Rock Hall becomes the #1 thing they're going to do other than what they came for? Do you have those statistics?
Not per se. We do focus groups, and we're getting ready to go out and do some more. We do them around the country and drive cities particularly. And I think the statistic for Cleveland, we're within 6 hours of 48 or 50% of the population in the country. And we do these focus groups, and we ask them a number of things. What exhibits would you like to see? And surprisingly enough, there are no singular exhibits that drive attendance. Every exhibit we do allows us to do PR and advertising to tell the world, come to Cleveland, not for the exhibit, just put our name back out there. We've tested every concept, both artist and genre, and nothing really does surprisingly better than anything else. I remind people, as I said earlier at lunch, as much as you may love John Lennon, there's 1 million people out there that hate Yoko Ono because she broke up the Beatles, and they won't come because that stuff is there. And that's the kind of dynamic that exists in our museum versus whether you're a Picasso or a Gauguin fan, you may not like them, but you're going to go see them because you'll never see them all in one place again. So there's very dynamic. But we also, the thing we do know is that in focus groups, we are largely the decision maker for people on a tourist basis who are coming to Cleveland, is to come to the museum. The biggest challenge is bundling that message with all the other things there are to do here. And that's something that I'm on the Positively Cleveland board, and so that's part of our challenge here, is to make sure that everybody knows all the assets this town has between the great sports teams and the museums, the orchestra, the zoo, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent. We're going to open up to questions in just 1 second, so get your questions ready. We'll take questions for about 15 minutes. But Terry, my last question is really the induction ceremonies. Coming to Cleveland next year.
Did you get a ticket yet?
Not yet. I'm going to talk about.
Are you a member?
No. he was teasing me earlier. I was a charter member whose membership elapsed.
My favorite.
He's never going to let me live that one down.
My most hated statement is,
right.
I was a charter member, but. But I've hit him hard up here. I apologize for that. But
That's all right.
it assures me that I'll get the check in the next week or so.
Exactly. We'll see each other shortly. But the induction ceremonies themselves, you know, in order to bring that to town, there must have been a lot of years of legwork. If you could talk a little bit about what that took and how that's going to have an impact itself, and then we'll have questions from the audience.
Well, interesting enough, we were always capable, even though it's run by the foundation, we were capable of bringing the inductions here. The problem is the financial challenge. Being a museum without an endowment or an operating reserve, to take on the risk of the inductions, just doing it for one night, which is what they do in New York. One night is roughly $3 to $3.5 million. To take on that risk of selling the tables in this town and putting the structure together was something our board was not comfortable with until we got to the point where we built a small operating reserve, we've got an endowment now. And secondarily, Mayor Jackson came to me 5 years ago, and said, what's it going to take to get the induction here? And I told him the story. He said, I want it here every year. I said, well, you don't really want it here every year. It'll kill me. It'll kill us to try to raise those funds every year. So we came to the conclusion that every 3 years would be the best. And then the mayor very heroically agreed, to help fund it. And he put some money in it because of the economic impact of the event. And that allowed us to leverage it with foundations and other institutions. Now the second time around, we've gotten city, county, state, foundation, and private funding to make this a reality. Our budget for the week next year is about $6.5 million. And out of that, we have to cover our lost revenues of our gala that we have every year, which we make about $300,000 on. And the fundraising we do for that also has to cover the diminution of our normal annual fundraising. So it's a challenge. You have not only hard costs that go into creating the events, you also have these lost sort of profit opportunities you have to cover. So it's monumental, but it's very rewarding. I think if any of you remember what a great success it was 2 years ago, we're actually going to make it bigger and better. And to give you a sense, it will actually open with a press conference on, I think it's April 5th, which is a Thursday, 2 Thursdays before the Saturday. We have some events planned before Good Friday and before Easter that Sunday, and then we kick off in full earnest on Monday night. On Monday with the opening of the Library and Archives. On Tuesday we have our Rock My Soul Gospel Awards show, which we'll do over at Cleveland State. We'll honor a famous gospel star. That's a free show for the city. Wednesday we'll open the Grateful Dead exhibit, and hopefully one of the Dead bands will be here, and the Dead will be here. Thursday is a free show for Cleveland, the concert for Cleveland, which I was just talking to Lynn Kamarowski. We're very pleased, and it's going to be at the Q this year. That's a wonderful thing. And we will have a lineup, a very diverse lineup. Last time we had old school hip hop, we had the OJs, and we had Dave Mason. We're going to go for even more and bigger talent this time around. We'll see if we can get it in here. Again, we have to beg and borrow and steal to get them in here. We can't afford to pay people their going rates. Friday night's the VIP party at the museum. And Saturday is open free day at the museum, and then Saturday night is the inductions. And if you're not aware, we've actually sold all the tables. We sold 130 tables already. And we're taking a waiting list because we have to hold a few tables for artists and other folks, and if they drop out, and certain people may drop out of their commitments to buy the tables, plus there's 6,000 seats upstairs. And those seats go as little as $50 and as high as $300. So I urge you, if you're interested in going, you should all be interested in going. If you are a member, you will get first crack at the upstairs seats. So there's still time to join. Those seats won't go on sale till December. And we're very excited about the inductions coming about. And you know, I just happen to have here the nominees this year. I don't have the inductees yet. If you didn't see, it's the Beastie Boys, the Cure, Donovan, Eric B. and Raheem, Guns N' Roses, Heart, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Freddie King, Laura Nero, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rufus with Shaka Khan. I don't know if I told you Shaka Khan will be here with Aretha. Small Faces, The Faces, 2 groups. The Spinners, Donna Summer and War. And the ballots will go out in about a week, and we'll get the results back in the end of November. Of course, we're all hoping that we'll get somebody like Guns N' Roses so we can have full drama to see if Axl and Slash will show up, and if they show up, will they get on the stage, and if they get on the stage, will they start fighting? And, you know, that's what makes it fun. And that has happened before, folks. That has happened. That has happened. So.
Excellent. Let's take some questions from the audience. You got a question? Just raise your hand.
I'll answer the one you're all thinking, why isn't Rush in? Because they didn't get enough votes, okay? Same thing with Kiss Moody Blues in Chicago. I was telling folks at my table, I get about 10,000 emails a year that start out, I can't say what I said at the table, dear moron, and go downhill from there about why certain acts aren't inducted. And I promise you that every major act you can think of, and probably most minor acts, have been nominated at the committee level, of which there are 40 of us, and just have not made it to the final ballot for whatever reason. The nominating committee has inductees, major artists, writers, journalists, critics, doctors of education, et cetera, et cetera. And very, very knowledgeable group. We're allowed to nominate 3 acts. You can't talk about popularity, hit records. You can only talk about impact, influence, innovation, and excellence in music. And we stay in a room all day until we come out with a ballot. That ballot is sent to 600 voters. The 600 voters are the largest block of the 400 living inductees. So when somebody doesn't get in, and they write me, I say, write Prince, call Bonnie Raitt, call Bruce, call these people. I'm one vote, but that's 400 voters right there, so they make a difference. So, and you have to get a majority of the votes cast to get in, which usually, given the way it's weighted, it means 5 to 7 artists get in as performers every year. We also have non-performers, early influence, and musical excellence, which cover a whole raft of individuals who are involved with the music industry who also get in. Not every year. We don't always have inductees in that category, but we have them most years.
Interesting. Nope. Oh, way back in the corner. There we go.
Hi, Terry. Thanks for coming. You know, we used to read all these stories about rock and rollers trashing their hotel rooms at these wild parties. Is there anything you can tell us about anything that happened in Cleveland? Any insights?
Well, I can, but it's secondhand. But and most people, there's probably a lot of people here who know the stories better than I do. But Swingo's was the rock and roll hotel in America. It was known that you could tear the place apart. They wouldn't say one thing to you. They just charged your credit card for the walls, the windows, whatever you tore up. Most hotels made a big deal out of it. You know, they get mad. Swingo's never worried about that, and it's unfortunate that institution is gone. And if you've seen Almost Famous, the art direction for that movie did come out of Cleveland, and the hotel in there, even though it's not named, is Swingo's. So some of that still goes on. Who was at the trashed hotel this week? Oh, a baseball player. Some baseball player trashed a rented house. So we still see it sometimes in limos and hotels. Not as much as we used to, though.
Over there.
Hi, what's the next exhibit after Olympia Rock?
Grateful Dead. That week, and as I said, you know, sorry, you weren't paying attention. It's okay.
Well, I'll ask this question then to that. How long will that exhibit last?
Our exhibits are quite expensive to put together, and as such, they usually stay up for almost a year. The Women Who Rock will travel. It's booked in 3 museums right now. The Bruce Springsteen exhibit will go to Philadelphia next fall. So most of our exhibits travel, and our major exhibits. We also do 3 to 5 small exhibits. We do a couple of photography exhibits, other small exhibits each year. We try to be very topical when an opportunity arises, anniversaries or things of that nature. So if we can put the material together, the critical mass of material, we'll put that together.
Excellent. Next question. Yes.
I was going to say, do you rely on a core of volunteers at the museum and or for the educational programs that you do?
We have, education-wise, we do have volunteers, but we have 4 PhDs and other staff. I mean, this is very serious stuff with us, and we do have volunteers from the educational world that help with classes. We're down there teaching 4 days a week from around 10 o'clock till noon in our biggest theater, and then we're online 5 days a week. We've run out of, we can't take any more online classes than we took last year. We're in 43 states, 9 countries. We teach in Spanish and English. Again, math, science, social. It's fabulous. We do have a core a group of volunteers called roadies, and they include our docents. And if anybody's interested in being a roadie or a docent, and there are great perks, including tickets and concerts and backstage stuff that's possible, we're going to start a new docent class this year, because the folks that are docents, we don't just let somebody volunteer and let them walk people around the museum. They have to have sort of our version of the history of rock and roll and what the museum really incorporates. So we're going to start that shortly. And we do that on our Wednesday night night school. We have night school every Wednesday during the whole month, and we do different programs on those Wednesdays, and one of them will be a program for the docents.
Excellent. Is that a question over there?
I think somewhere along the line I heard the museum displays only like 10% of its collection. Is that a true number, and how often does the material in the main exhibits change?
Well, the core exhibits modify, periodically. You have to rest costumes and lyrics. They're exposed to light, even with, and we're about a month away from finishing a complete renovation of the museum, which included all new lighting, which is mostly LED lighting. And for that reason, the artifacts are more protected than ever, but they still can't suffer long periods, just being exposed to light. So we rotate items in and out into our vault, which is in the back of the museum. We also have 2 warehouses that we store material in. If you were to look at just the pure number of items, it's probably around 10%. Because again, we have hundreds of thousands of records and papers and documents which have never been accessible, that will now largely be accessible through the library. You'll be able to walk in there and either see a digitized version of a document, actually pick a record and they'll play it on a turntable. You're not allowed to copy music in the libraries. I didn't know this till we built the library. You can't have a server that plays the music. You have to go get the physical item and play it. So if you look at it on a total artifact basis, it's probably 10%. I would say probably about 60% of the 2-dimensional artifacts that you would normally expect to see are on display at any one time.
Great. We have time for one last question.
Terry, not to put you on the spot, but
you won't be the first.
Your joke about has everybody in the room been to the hall? Do you have any idea how my friend here called it a jewel. It's a diamond in the rough because I'm going to give up Earth and give us a waterfront that is appropriate for this city and its history. Do you think that the foundation can do anything to try to leverage Cleveland into a future of development?
I don't know. There's so many stories about Burke, why we can't do it, won't do it, shouldn't do it. You've all heard it between contaminated land, runoff airstrip for Hopkins, the cost to move it, et cetera, et cetera. My biggest hope, and I doubt that we'll have much influence there. What's interesting is the museum was built with a feasibility studies that said that the waterfront would be developed, and it said that we probably would never be successful if the waterfront wasn't developed, because there was no understanding that as many people would come from around the world as have come. And obviously the Science Center is there and Brown Stadium is there. What's exciting to us is that I think that the new waterfront plan, which is certainly a viable plan as far as we're concerned, could have the chance of being jump-started, particularly by some of the activities that the Browns expect to do at Brown Stadium. We haven't heard much about that in the last few months, but we have the Browns are on our board, and we work with them. We're very excited about some of the ambitions they have around sort of the Lambeau Field kind of venue. And I believe if some of that activity takes place, it will generate some additional economic activity out there. There's a need to build a connector between our building and the Science Center. That's the biggest need we have. We do not have a parking lot. Can you imagine you build a $100 million world-class museum without a parking lot? It's nuts. But that's never going to change, so it's not going to change. So Science Center has an underutilized, over-leveraged parking lot that we send people to. But when the weather's bad, it's hard to get them there. It's hard to get them back. You can get blown off that sidewalk any time of the year, as you know. And it's the biggest wind tunnel in the world, as far as I'm concerned. But our hope is, and we're looking for funding for that connector. But that connector fits right into the development plan, which connects the whole waterfront, that you will then be able to walk both summer and winter down there. And we actually think there are opportunities to develop space between us and the Science Center. I've had a proposal for a boutique hotel there. Does that work? Well, 95% of our attendance is from outside of the city. Science Center is building their NASA Center, which will be a destination unlike the Science Center now, which is mostly local. If the Browns go forward with their plans there, that'll be a destination. So maybe that is a way that we help start that whole process. To me, it's most important that we develop the lakefront that's possible. I'm like every other person here. I really wish we had Burke available, but I've heard so many stories, I don't know if that's really possible with anybody's leverage involved.
Excellent. We'll squeeze one last one in. Keep it brief.
It's very important, Terry. We want to know if you're a musician yourself, and what do you play?
Well, I play alto sax worse than Bill Clinton. I mainly play the radio. Popular culture has been my life since I was very small. I got lost in the weeds being a banker and an engineer and a lawyer and all this other stuff. And having been at Marvel and now doing what I do, the main thing about me is that drives my wife nuts is that I have 500,000 records. And I have, 10 jukeboxes, and I collect all sorts of stuff. Mainly it's about enjoying and listening to music to me. I played music for a long time, but as much as I enjoyed it, I never enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed going to hear it. And in fact, one of the frustrations of living in Cleveland and working as much as I do is I don't even get to go to the clubs as much as I want to. And if you don't know, as I said earlier, we have a great club system here. We have a great system of emerging and established fans between the clubs that I mentioned earlier that come in. So that's my big joy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Terry Stewart.